Hello and welcome to ComposersCAPE. This is our Marvel episode. The last episode we talked with Zack Snyder's Justice League and DC Comics, and in this one we are going to talk about the first two episodes of Falcon and Winter Soldier. And just being that we're us, it'll definitely be spoiler heavy, and we will see how it's potentially connecting to the MCU world at large. And then we are going to do our first book club segment, and we'll talk about the first half of House of M. Wow, I didn't know that was going to be so hard to say. But here we go.
Assemble. All right. Falcon and Winter Soldier, that's what we're going to start with. Marvel Disney just does not disappoint. And that's obviously my opinion. Of course, I'm sure people would disagree with that. You're out there leaving nasty comments on the internet. But as far as I'm concerned, the quality of these Marvel Cinematic Universe shows produced for the Disney Plus platform are just right on par with the movies. And I'm sure a lot of that is the budget, the directing, the people that have producing these shows are every bit on par with any major film production.
Yeah, and I think WandaVision was $150 million, so that's like the movie budget.
Right. And I think I mentioned this maybe at the tail end of our previous episode where we talked about Justice League. Was it Kevin Feige, who was one of the producers, basically said that their vision, no pun intended, for the Falcon and Winter Soldier show was to have a very cinematic quality, that each of these episodes needs to feel like an arc or an act of one of the major films. And so far, they're spot on. We haven't talked about this show yet. We're 2 episodes into the season at this point. And so far, the first 2 episodes, you could watch them seamlessly, right? If you could squeeze them together and cut out the, opening credits of the second episode, you could just watch the whole thing from start to finish. And you'd have what feels like, the first film of a trilogy of,
I was
90,
thinking that too, because
100 minutes.
I remember the first episode was good, but once I watched the second episode, I was like, now, okay. The first episode seemed very much set up, and they almost should have dropped the first 2 episodes at once.
Yeah,
I think
agree.
Didn't they do that for WandaVision? That would have been good, but I don't think it hurt their numbers. So well, after watching the second episode, that's like, wow.
Obviously, there's a huge component of this story that is the gaping hole that Steve Rogers left in the lives of his best friends. And I think a lot of the just emotional tension and the drama, which has created some really good kind of humor and sarcasm going between Sebastian Shaw and, Lord, I need another cup of coffee.
Falcon and Winter Soldier. Anthony Mackie.
Wow.
Mackie. Like the sound company.
Anyway, you've got some really good chemistry between these two guys. That what I kept thinking of is there was likely a moment during the filming and the writing of Civil War where these two...
there had been, because they weren't on screen. I was thinking the same thing.
Well, they had some moments on screen where Steve is, basically on the run, and he goes and meets up with Agent Carter, gets his shield back, and they're hanging out in the car, just talking, move the seat up. No, move over. I hate you, right? Just these kind of...
I remember that now.
And it's got this very tongue-in-cheek, sarcastic kind of buddy cop vibe to it, but they're definitely, I think the common ground here is that they both just feel like they were robbed of someone who was one of their best friends. And not only that, but what is most poignant in the appearance of someone trying to take his place, the feeling of, the world needs Captain America, right? The world needs the real Captain America, right? We need Steve back, and he's gone, and nothing anybody can do can replace it. And I feel like that's the core of this story.
Yeah, I was wondering in that second episode, one, I was going to mention that I was very happy that they didn't drag out getting those two together. I was a little worried after the first episode that it's like, wow, they're not going to get together till the series is half over. But then, like the second episode, Bucky just shows up. It's like, hi. But they kept talking about Steve as if he's dead.
Yeah, and I guess we don't know that for a fact, but I think it's what's probably implicit. Maybe I'm making a huge assumption here. Who knows? Maybe he turns up later, but is that he lived his life, came back at the end, and he's old, right, and just wants to disappear. And it's possible they just let him walk away, and nobody knows where he is. Right? That's entirely possible. Since Steve essentially got a redo somehow, and let's not even get into the logistics and all of the mind-bending possibilities there. Like he went back in time and he fixed everything, and then he stayed back in time. So are we in an alternate timeline now? Or did he exist in an alternate timeline in this, right? The whole idea of a multiverse and time
they've
travel.
Already killed Thanos in an alternate timeline. So
yeah, you'll tie your brain into knots trying to figure out exactly how all that works. Right. So I think in its most simplest form, if you really want to have a discussion about time travel and if one person can exist simultaneously in the same reality during the same time, it's possible that Steve went back in time and was alive and essentially in hiding, watching himself on the news, do all the stuff he did for the last, 10, 15 years, living in a cabin up in Colorado or somewhere, right? He's Captain Rogers, right? Captain America still existed. Old Steve hanging out somewhere, remembering all of the stuff that he did as it's coming on the evening news, and the Avengers save New York City, right? He's watching it all happen because it already happened for him anyway.
Well, that would mean at one point there were 3 Steves in the world.
Oh, you're right. Okay, stop.
So yeah, they have no problem with that. You could occupy the same space and even touch each other, unlike Back to the Future. So
right. You've got Falcon, right? Anthony Mackie's character, Sam, is continuing to work as some kind of covert government operative. We have no idea what agency he's working for. Obviously, S.H.I.E.L.D. doesn't really exist in its old form. Maybe it's the, who knows? It's the CIA, if it's the Department of Defense. Somebody is sending him on missions. He's got this guy that's his handler, right? That's kind of the
impression after the second episode that he was
a free agent, right? That's kind of what he says.
That he's running on his. He's like he's like Batman. He's got his team of people working with him or something. But he's because they kind of said at the end of the episode, Bucky was saying to new Captain America, to John Walker, or I think was his name. Like, he's like, you have rules of engagement and we don't.
That's right.
So that makes me wonder, maybe they are just working on their own, and maybe that guy is just on his personal team. I mean,
it's some kind of black ops sort of team budget, Falcon. It's sort of way under the radar somewhere, right? I mean, it's they're getting on DC-10s and these transport carriers and military bases and stuff. Someone has to know what they're doing, but it's probably like way hush hush under the table, black ops kind of stuff, and they're just sending them into areas that no, they can't send a SEAL team or someone into because. And that brings up a whole other topic that I don't want to necessarily get too far off on a rabbit hole with this, but I think most of the Falcon's tech is a lot of that stuff is Stark tech.
Yep.
And this is something that I feel like there's a little bit of a hole here that they're going to have to somehow the writers are going to have to, it's possible they'll just ignore it and write around it, right? And just assume they'll just move forward and everyone just assumes this technology exists. It's in the world. And even though Tony invented it, there are other people who maybe worked under him or have come along and know how to work with this technology and continue to make it, possibly. But there's a lot of the Red Wing drone, right? You've got the Wakandans, obviously. But, you know, this crazy, like, ultra far advanced tech, you know, who's maintaining that stuff? You know, where's that coming from?
That just opens the door to bring in more. Well, Hank Pym is still out there. He got blipped.
Yeah.
And he'd be able to figure out Stark's tech pretty easily. He worked with his father.
He's not really in the weapons business, though, right?
Right.
Anyway, that's a whole rabbit hole. It's something that I think of occasionally that not a plot hole necessarily, but there's just a void. There's something left there that I feel like at some point there's an opportunity for someone to, either through the films or the shows, to just maybe even mention or try to address. I don't know. I digress. Talking about Falcon and Winter Soldier, the action.
Well, no, I mean, and how it connects, so that works as well. So
sure. Well, I think
I do have to bring up in the first episode, it was pointed out that Anthony Mackie was like hurting for money. And then they were like, "You get paid a lot, right?" And he's like, "No, the Avengers." And then almost immediately, like the day before, Justice League, it just came out, and Bruce Wayne is, you know, buying a bank to get Clark's farm out of foreclosure, right? So everyone's like, so Bruce Wayne is obviously going to help the Justice League out monetarily. Tony Stark just is like, well, F them. They could get a job.
Right. There's a whole kinds of questions you could ask there. And what's funny,
maybe it's Pepper.
I mean, there's a little bit of a precedent for that in the comics. And when I say there's a precedent for the fact that Avengers, they do make some kind of salary. And you and I were talking about Brian Michael Bendis in reading the House of M and getting interested in some of his other work. And he did a run with Avengers comics. And if I'm not mistaken, the story arc that he worked on there opens with this scene where Tony is trying to rebuild an Avengers team after I can't remember what precedes that in the story, in the canon, but he's putting the team back together, and he approaches Peter Parker, right, and is basically asking, you know, all of these different heroes at one-time Avengers, are you interested? We're trying to put something back together. And I think there's this scene where Peter says, you know, is there money? And Tony says, well, yes, of course. And Peter's like, that's all you needed to say. Yes. Right. There's a paycheck. Thank you. So I was going to say, I feel like the action and everything in Falcon and Winter Soldier is just unbelievably good. It's just the opening sequence of the first episode, this aerial combat scene of him flying around. You really get to see Falcon do his thing in a way that I don't feel like you got to see in a way you didn't get to see in the movies. You got to see him to do some in the films, but this was a whole sequence, like a 5-8 minute long sequence of Falcon just being a complete, you know, badass in the air. I
think his wings got upgraded. He got a pretty good scene in Ant-Man.
Yeah. That's true.
Fought, but I feel like since his first appearance till now, maybe noticeable in an Infinity War, his wings have progressively gotten more maneuverable. Like in the second episode, he gets knocked off the top of the semi and just like zips and then comes down, and he's doing all these crazy like stops and quicks and all of these things. And so I feel like it's some of
that could just be training, right?
Yeah.
Like he's an Avenger, and suddenly they, you know, putting him through all this training and stuff to like, he's got to stay alive.
Yeah. I feel like him and this John Walker character are these very Bruce Wayne type humans who have exceptional reflexes and strength, and they can just think a millisecond faster than a regular person. Because they showed the John Walker training scene, and he's throwing that shield as if he does have super strength, but he doesn't.
That surprised me. And it won't surprise me I don't know. That surprised me a little bit because let's get super nerdy here, folks. Let's just go in there. We've already talked about time travel, and now we've talked about Stark Tech. Let's just go ahead and talk about super soldiers and superhuman strength and reflexes. We have no idea. We have no idea how heavy vibranium is. And for all we know, it's much like titanium, which means it has very great tensile strength without the density of steel and iron, right?
I think it's based on mithril from Lord of the Rings.
It could be.
So it would be very light.
And so is there some sort of gauntlet or bracelet or something like that Steve wears? There's some sort of fitting that goes along with the shield that is magnetic, that allows the shield to return to its wearer, right? Because
I think
Peter
it's
Parker,
another shield that you can throw it and it comes back.
Well, not magic. It's not Mjolnir, right? And Peter
no.
It's
the way it's aerodynamically designed. It can work like a boomerang, but also it seems to be a skill because whenever Steve is throwing the shield and it comes back, it's because it's ricocheting off things to come back to it.
Of course.
And he just is able to think so quickly. And that's what's interesting is apparently this John Walker guy can as well.
Well, Spider-Man actually makes the comment in Civil War, like, that thing does not obey the laws of physics.
Right.
What the hell? Anyway, so we see the scene of the new Captain America throwing, and it's the Good Morning America sequence. They're showing these videos of him training, and he's so awesome, and he's throwing the shield at these target dummies and just nailing them, and it's coming right back. And we get a little glimpse of that while he's fighting these sort of freedom fighter supposed super soldiers on top of the semis where he's throwing it around. It's coming it back, and then he throws it on the ground to save his buddy, right? Throws the shield down on the ground and catches him as he's falling off
like
the
Batman
semi.
reflexes there.
Yeah. Clearly the guy is just a top-notch peak human conditioning, peak humans. But again, I think the point I was trying to make there is like the whole deal with vibranium is someone who isn't enhanced, capable of throwing the shield around like that. And I guess right now we're just left with the assumption of, apparently it's, it's something that anyone can do.
Trying to learn how to do it.
Yeah.
And he can hurl it fast, but it just bounces off trees and falls.
Right. And maybe it's practice. Like you said, it's a skill. You have to learn how to do it. Well, he throws the shield in that scene, and I remember thinking this, the new Captain America, he throws the shield down on the ground and saves his buddy, and then turns around and he's face to face with all these super soldiers. And in my mind, I'm thinking, so he's lost the shield. Now he's just a guy.
Yeah, and that ended exactly how I expected it to.
Yeah.
He talks big, he's like, that was a big mistake, and they were probably like, well, yeah, and then poof.
Yeah, right. So
and then it gets into comic book. It's like, you just got punched by someone who's super strength and it didn't cave your chest in. Congratulations.
And so this is a really good moment to point out, getting back to what I feel like is the core of this story. Bucky he's really emotional and conflicted. He's still dealing with a lot. We open up with this scene. He's seeing a therapist and still trying to process all of this death and the assassinations and all of this stuff he was forced to do earlier years. And he's trying to process the loss of Steve. And he comes face to face with that because you got this new, what he feels like is this schmuck, right? This schlub that's just walking around in a costume and carrying Steve's shield, and he resents that. And he's got these rules of engagement, right, that he's working on. Like, I'm not supposed to hurt anybody. I'm not supposed to do anything illegal, right? I'm supposed to be apologizing and kind of making amends. Like, it's a 12-step program. And so I feel like you get this atmosphere during this fight scene on the semis with these super soldiers where he is restrained. He is holding back, because if he basically allowed himself to just go full on Winter Soldier mode, I feel like he could have mopped the floor with a few of those guys, at least, even though they were outnumbered. Probably
but it
would
would
have
have killed them, and that's the problem.
Yeah,
he wasn't
exactly.
trained the same way Bruce Wayne was to fight, right, where Bruce could beat those dudes' ass without hurt, he would send him to a hospital, and put him in traction. But no, Bucky he only knows lethal combat at this point.
That's right. And so I feel like that was a significant kind of takeaway from that whole fight scene. They got their asses kicked, not because they were outnumbered, but because they were exercising some restraint. They didn't know what they were up against. The fact that these guys were super soldiers took them off guard by surprise, right? Initially, they thought the girl in the semi was a hostage, which was a really dumb assumption to make. I thought, like, why would you assume
Right.
that?
They didn't.
And then you've got Bucky, who's basically kind of emotionally compromised, and he's holding back. He's like, I'm not supposed to murder anybody any longer, so I can't really go all out with these guys. And he ends up sort of trapped on the bottom of the semi. Although I did crack up at one point because he was holding on to the edge of the truck, and one of the super soldiers was trying to jam his feet down, try to knock his fingers off. I'm like, his hand is made out of vibranium.
Yeah.
He may not even be able to feel that. You're wasting your
Right.
time. Anyway.
I was wondering, the girl who's the leader of the super soldier team looked very familiar. Was she in
Yes. Saw
Solo?
her recently. Yes. She was one of the rebel freedom fighters in Solo. Yep.
I can't remember the name of the group.
I can't either, but they were essentially a precursor to the rebellion.
Yeah. Yep. There it is.
Yep.
She was Infy's Nest.
Yeah.
That's
what
her
is
name.
Yeah. And what is in that movie the seed group, right? The sort of group that gave birth to the Rebel Alliance in Solo. Wow. See, folks, stick around long enough. We're going to talk about Star Wars.
Oh yeah, we unfortunately we started the show after the Mandalorian had wrapped up, but
Yeah.
and the one thing I will talk about, one little Star Wars snippet, Solo is still one of the best of all the new movies and possibly the most underrated Star Wars film of all of them.
I agree. I have deep appreciation for Solo and for Rogue One. And if you haven't ever watched Solo, Rogue One, and then Episode 4, A New Hope, in that order,
yes,
you've done yourself a disservice. There is an incredible poignance and sort of emotional kind of effect. There's something very powerful about watching Rogue One in that end scene, which takes place on these Corellian ships. All the white and Darth Vader comes in, kills, and then you immediately watch Episode 4.
Yes, and you can't wait a day. You need to I've done that where you take one day and I'm watching the two together. But anyway, so back to Falcon and Winter Soldier. Well, it's all Disney. They'll be happy. We talked about them all. Yeah, it's really interesting. And then I liked the part where in their impromptu therapy session when he was forced, when Bucky was forced to call out Sam for the shield thing and then hurt Sam's feelings. And then he's walking out. He's like, what was rule number 2 again?
Yep.
Don't hurt anyone.
Yes.
So yeah, I could see it's good. It's definitely got that buddy cop feel. Now, is it the Darcy and Detective Wu buddy cop show we all want? No, but it's really good.
Yeah. Some other plot details, things that I think bear mentioning, and we won't spend all day talking about Falcon and Winter Soldier. This is probably not going to be a super long episode.
Right.
So we have elements of Hydra that continue to linger, and I think we knew this from the beginning, from the trailers and from the cast, obviously, that Baron Zemo, you got to see his face there at the end of the episode, and apparently they're going to go find him.
Baron Zemo. He's going to be in costume and everything.
So we are definitely going to get an appearance, a strong representation of Baron Zemo, who was clearly a major figure in Civil War, but we never got to see the sort of comic book version. Kind of say, he was more of a, here's a grieving sort of an ex special forces European military guy who's grieving and just sort of pulling strings like, a puppeteer.
We saw his origin story.
Yeah,
but he never became Baron Zemo. But now he may be at least part of the next big threat in the MCU. I feel.
So long as they don't make him look like Mushmouth. From Fat Albert. Baron Zemo, I always thought he's got this basically purple toboggan on and he's cut little eye holes in there, just make him look like female.
Yeah, well, there's something. It's probably going to be a prefab, though, not like a cut.
Yeah.
But
Sure.
yeah, they show it in the credits at the end.
Oh, I must have missed that.
It's like kind of all stylized.
Yeah. And speaking of other characters that we are likely going to see in the show, I'm fairly sure that this is confirmed, right? She's in the cast. Agent Carter, I believe, is going to make an appearance.
As a matter of fact, they show her in the credits as well.
Right.
So they're not trying to hide it.
So we've got some major players that are going to make an appearance again. I think, let's kind of tinfoil hat it here in a manner of speaking, maybe make some predictions. I think everyone is expecting that. I got 2 or 3 things here. Let's just kind of list them off. Is the new Captain America above board? Is he legit? Is he some kind of Hydra? Is he a sleeper agent, some kind of Manchurian candidate that's going to snap at one point and he's going to end up being a villain? Is Sam going to end up with the shield and become the new Captain America, right? Which, essentially is what you do get from, oh, yeah, look at that. Okay. I apparently missed that promo.
I don't think it's bad.
That artwork. No, it's good. In the comics, there are no eye holes. It looks like he has a bag over his head.
Well, that's the comics.
Right. Sharon Carter. What is her role going to be in this? And will we ever see... This is a big question that I've had for a while. So there is a television show called Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. where we got Coulson came back, and that ties into the Inhumans story, where you've got a couple of the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents that are, Inhumans that got exposed to Terrigen Mist, and they have superpowers. The character that plays Quake, and some other elements of that. So according to that show, and I've never heard or read any confirmation of this, is that at all considered canon with the MCU?
Yeah, I've heard they kind of moved away from S.H.I.E.L.D. being canon.
Because I've wondered for some time now, are we going to see a resurgence or a return of S.H.I.E.L.D. in some form? Now, we get S.W.O.R.D. thanks to Alien Invasions, Thanos, and now WandaVision, and we see this, S.W.O.R.D. has apparently got a much larger kind of presence in the established MCU now. We see that, but is S.H.I.E.L.D. ever gonna be a thing?
Well, I guess if anything will tell us, this series will.
Right. And
especially if they're bringing in Agent Carter's.
Last but not least, Steve Rogers was not the only successful super soldier patient candidate. There are more.
Isaiah a character from the comics, or is this a new character?
I have no idea. I didn't actually do any research on that. I'm not sure. And according to Bucky, if I'm not mistaken, this conversation he has with Sam, he was Hydra, or he was working for the U.S. government and was probably
was a good guy, and Bucky was Hydra.
Right. So what's that going to lead to? And kind of opens a door there. Now, obviously, we know that the Winter Soldier was not the only, that there was some failed experiments with the Soviet super soldier program because they just couldn't be controlled, and they were just sort of murder machines. Ended up killing the scientists that were working with them, right? We got that scene in Civil War, and they're all dead. But obviously there's some more wandering around in the world.
Yeah, I get the feeling what it comes down to is the government never told. I mean, the only ones that would know about super soldiers would be Bucky and Steve Rogers and S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah.
And whatever further was done with it, and maybe it'll bring back the end of the Hulk, the Incredible Hulk movie, where that's what they were trying to do there. Maybe from their experiments on Monster Guy, they figured out more. I don't know.
Yeah,
but even then, that's after Korea, long after Korea. So,
well, we get this band of freedom fighters who have obviously been enhanced somehow. And we don't know if that's a super soldier serum. We don't know if it's some kind of, I mean, the door's wide open because it's MCU, right? It could be some kind of magic artifact. It could be some kind of technology. It could be, right? We don't know that they're enhanced with super soldier form, but they keep referring to them. After seeing them in action, Bucky and Sam are both convinced like these people are super soldiers, right? Look at they're incredibly strong and fast and durable. They move and can fight like Steve, like Bucky did. So we'll see. Does this open the door for other possibly heroes to get their hands on some of this stuff? To get enhanced? I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if the next Cap is going to get the super soldier serum, because in the comics it may work that a regular person can be Captain America, but I'm not so sure that the movies that your standard non-comic book reader fans will be like, well, I don't see this John Walker or even Falcon being able to like lift Mjolnir or hurl vehicles around, motorcycles around and stuff like that. And then that's kind of what Captain America is to the regular people. He's a super strong, super fast, super soldier.
Definitely superhuman. I don't disagree with that, with the one caveat that I think most of us are making a pretty big assumption here with this show and the way that the story has worked out so far, that they are taking a large cue from the comics where Sam Wilson becomes the new Captain America. He is still found. He's got the wings. He's got the tech, right? All training and all that stuff. And to my knowledge, he is not physically enhanced. He does not have superhuman anything other than all this technology. And he inherits the shield and takes up the mantle and becomes the new Captain America. He's basically Falcon with the shield and a new paint job.
They could still surprise us, though.
True.
What if at the end of Bucky's the new Captain America?
Yeah. And for a time,
or John Walker.
Bucky, there was a period of time, if I'm not mistaken, sometime in the late 80s and the 90s, where Steve was missing out of commission, one of those periods of time where Steve couldn't be Captain America, and James Buchanan took up the mantle and became Captain America. There's also this other character that exists called U.S. Agent.
Yeah, I think that's who people thought John Walker was.
Possibly, right? And it's possible that's kind of, they're taking a lot of cues from the comics. At the same time, the Marvel universe, the cinematic universe, has never been beholden to the comics, right? There's they've shown a lot of they've shown a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? They're very faithful, right? And they definitely hold the comics and the storylines and the origins of the characters there in very high regard, and they take many of their cues from the comics, but at the same time, they're not tied down. And there's a lot of examples of that. I mean, the Vision as a character is a perfect example of this. His origins and his creation and how he came to be is quite different in the MCU compared to the comics. In the comics, he was created by Hank Pym. And so there's no relationship there. And the Mind Stone was not part of his physiology, part of his programming or anything like that in the comics. So anyway, we're doing a lot of speculation here. There's lots of the show left.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Among all the million other things happening this month. I think this might tie into Black Widow, but we can talk about that as it progresses and we'll see.
Yeah. Well, correct me if I'm wrong. Black Widow is a flashback.
Well, yeah, it's got to be. She dead.
Right. And has a Cold War element
to this. I don't know.
Right? You're going to get the Red Guardian and Yelena Beloff, whatever her name is. She's one of the other Red Room agents. And so you're going to get this Soviet sort of Cold War era theme in that film. I don't know anything about the story. I just know the characters that are in it. And the Red Guardian is this character that is a sort of Soviet Captain America, right? He's
that's going to be so funny with the
Captain Russia.
Things.
That's right.
It's going to be great.
Yeah.
All right. So let's pause and then do the book club.
Yeah.
All right. Be
we
right
will
back.
return after a word from our sponsors.
So, we're going to do our new book club, and we're going to talk about House of M, probably over the next few weeks.
Yes. I feel like this is something that was at least partially inspired by WandaVision. Because this is a story, fairly famous story arc in the comics, that I could be mistaken here, and I'd love to read something by or hear an interview with them from the writers, the folks who put together WandaVision, if this was in fact something that they took a large cue from.
Well, I mean, it had to be.
Yeah, because this is in the past when episodes we talked about WandaVision, and we talked about the fact that Wanda is debatably one of the most scary, powerful characters in the Marvel Universe, because she can literally warp and change reality. Is what you get in the WandaVision show, is her ability to just change reality on a fairly large scale. And that's what you have in House of M. It is essentially a story where Wanda snaps and is grieving and is so desperate to change the world into a way in which she wants it to be that she starts doing so, possibly on an even unconscious level. It's possible.
Yeah, that's the impression I got from that first issue. That the professor was like having to convince her that like it wasn't real.
This isn't real. And that's what you see in the opening of this story, is Wanda giving birth. And you've got several characters kind of gathered around the bedside there. And Dr. Strange was apparently present to sort of, as a good physician to give birth to the twins. And Magneto's there, and Vision, Dad is there, and it's twins, and everyone's happy, and it's a glorious day, and everything's just sort of roses and happiness. And Professor X shows up, wheels into the picture, and points out to Wanda, this isn't actually happening. This isn't real, right? And everybody starts getting upset, and everybody's angry, and she's crying, she's bawling, and then the whole thing, shatters, and get the impression that Professor X is having to exert a tremendous psychic influence on her to try to get through to her rational mind and try to connect a couple of dots there. And we're also given the impression that this is not the first time that this has happened.
Right.
And
he throws on his Lex Luthor face to get this pulled off here.
Yeah. Right. And this is in the wake of a previous story where she suffers a loss of control and reality altering powers, right? They give this kind of synopsis there that sort of sets the whole thing up, where Wanda was essentially responsible for the deaths of several Avengers, including Ant-Man, the Vision, some other people that get seriously hurt by this. And if I'm not mistaken, Hawkeye. I think Hawkeye.
Actually, that was the issue where I made it that she had killed Hawkeye, was one of the people that was killed.
Yeah. So the opening act of this is a lot of, frankly, it's just depressing. It's a lot of sadness. You've got Magneto still hanging around in the ruins of Genosha.
Yes. What is Genosha for
Genosha
the DC people out there?
Is an island nation, and what's interesting here is I think Genosha is it a real island?
I don't know, but it's definitely a planet where they manufacture the droid armies.
No, I think that's Geonos. I think it's pronounced different. Yeah. Yeah. So it is. I think it is fictional. I thought it was an actual island, right? But it is fictional, apparently, off the coast of southeastern Africa, right? Sort of in the neighborhood of Madagascar. And in the fictional biography of Genosha, this is just huge setup. This is actually stuff that's not even really that important necessarily to House of M, although it's good to have some background on the setting. for where a lot of House of M takes place. Genosha is this island nation that has a long history of enslaving mutants, of the human population there, putting mutants into slave labor, slave camps. And when Magneto, at one point in the comics continuity, finally makes his move and wants to establish a country, right? An independent sovereign nation just for mutants, where he can get recognized by the United Nations. He can create, like, let's go through official channels here and let's set it up. And they go basically going, he goes into Genosha and just cleans house and says, you know, what you all have done here are just crimes against mutant kind and humanity in general. And you guys just deserve to die. And just goes in, takes over, and manages to set up a sovereign nation. And as you can imagine, as is a typical story arc with mutants in the Marvel Comics, the creators of the Sentinels, all of the anti-mutant contingency in the world, this cabal of humans that would rather mutants just didn't exist, they unleash an attack on Genosha and just wipe it out.
Well, yeah, that explains why I'm looking at the nightmare sequence here in Marvel.
That's right. And so you see Magneto is still hanging out there, and that's apparently where he's got his family kept, and the Scarlet Witch is there, and you've got this burnout husk of a city there where you see scenes of just destruction and everything. Yeah. And that's basically what's happened. You're seeing here possibly a year or longer in the wake of that attack, right? Where Genosha is ruined.
Attack. I thought you were talking about the Scarlet Witch.
Right.
Okay. So all of this has happened fairly recently within the last.
That's right. In the fairly recent past. And so it's funny, in looking at the costumes and some of the artwork and how the characters are being drawn, and especially looking at the scene where the X-Men kind of make their appearance, this definitely coincides with the Astonishing X-Men story arcs. You can tell by the Beast, Cyclops, Shadowcat, Wolverine, Emma Frost, right? This team is the Astonishing X-Men, which is there's a Josh Whedon story arc, I'm pretty sure, that he wrote, and it's kind of diverged from Uncanny X-Men, but I digress. The point here is just trying to set up the timeline, right? Like when is all of this happening? And so it's very grim. And
they have this big meeting at the they refer to it as the Avengers Mansion. And the X-Men all show up to deal with the Scarlet Witch problem.
And you've got all of the Avengers there. You've got the extended cast, right? You've got basically the entire cast of the Avengers from the cinematic universe, like everybody's there. And you've got a couple of characters that we've still never seen in the MCU. Wonder Man, that we were talking about off camera before we started recording.
Now I remember also he's dating Miss Marvel, right?
Yeah, I think the Sentinel is present, if that's who that is. Sentinel, who is a really fascinating character in the Avengers continuity. We should definitely read that story arc sometime where you actually get introduced to the Sentinel. So what's the purpose of the meeting? You get the impression that obviously Professor X has talked to Stephen Strange, someone else who has traditionally struggled to keep Wanda in check, I guess that's the best way to put it, both to educate her and to try to teach her more responsible use of her power and, you know, the whole magic thing, which we've talked about in the past. And then Professor X obviously has had a lot of contact with Wanda over the years because she's a mutant. And they come together and say, not really sure, but, you know, we got to do something about this. And the conversation takes an incredibly grim turn when you realize that euthanizing her, right, just putting her down, is apparently on the table.
Right.
Which is shocking, right? You kind of think about the ramifications here. And in Quicksilver, you know, we get into a whole conversation about how fast can he move. Is he as fast as the Flash? Probably not, but the guy can obviously move very, very fast, and he's fast enough to get into the room where they're talking and he eavesdrops and then speeds back to Genosha and breaks the news to Magneto.
Yeah, see, I saw him show up. Oh, did they? I mean, I saw him in Genosha, but They didn't actually show him doing that.
No. But it kind of comes up in the conversation, right? He basically zips into the frame and is breaking the news. Why would he
invite him to that meeting?
Well, I think it's obvious why. They're trying to get everyone who is at least impartial, as much as any of these people can be. And obviously a lot of argument ensues, and you've got people on one side of the table, namely the mutants, mostly the X-Men, who are basically saying, you've lost your flipping mind. There's no way. You're talking about killing her, right? Let's just go ahead and say it out loud, right? There's no way. And what's incredibly shocking is Quicksilver speeds back home to let their dad know they're talking about killing her. And Magneto's response to this, which is very shocking, is, I know, right? What can I do? Right? What would you have me do? Because she's going to, who knows what she's going to do next. If they just let her go uncontrolled, she's going to knock the planet out of its orbit, or God, what? Right. Who knows? Right? She's going to destroy the world.
Of course, Cap's against it.
Of course he is.
Of course. That really that just vibes. This Captain America drawing to me just vibes of the Liebfield one.
Yeah. What's interesting is Doctor Strange doesn't say one way or the other. Is he for or against? Just sort of killing him. But he's obviously one of the people that everyone wants to know. Like, is there nothing you can do? And he says, so far, no. I am still working on it. Yep. Right. It's in so many words. He's like, give me more time.
Right.
But we also get the impression that he's just at the end of a rope. Right. Like everything we've tried so far isn't working. And Professor X has essentially
he's tried at least 1.4 million things.
Right. Professor X is, we get the impression that at least once, multiple times probably, he has just put her like in a psychic coma. Right. And the idea there is like, I can't just keep her asleep for the rest of her life. From all practical standpoint, what's the difference between that and just killing her? Right. I can just keep her in a coma forever, or we can just go ahead and decide to do this. Very, very grim. Right.
Yeah. I'm actually interested to see, I haven't read this, how they do it.
Well, they don't.
No, I know. I don't mean kill her. I meant get her out of this situation, because she's not. Well, I mean, they could kill her. They kill people in comics all the time. They just bring them back.
Well, you did say that you have read this far.
This far, yes. Yes, I know they don't kill her because she creates another physical or fictional. Or is it that she converts the world to something else? Because apparently the people are aware of themselves. Wolverine.
Yes. Right. So let's not get ahead of ourselves here.
Yeah.
The entire alliance, the Avengers, all of the X-Men, they all show up on Genosha, and not sure if they're just some of them have decided to just jump straight to, we're just going to walk in and kill her. Clearly there's a large contingent of these people who feel like we're going to go in and talk to her, right? We're going to talk to Magneto. We're going to let's bring everybody to the table here and let's at least have a conversation. And they show up on Genosha. And this is the part that I'm not entirely clear on, because they show up there looking for her and nobody's there. And Professor X, who you can pretty much count on to be able to sense someone's presence, right? Psychically, he can feel minds. And he's scanning the island and he says, there's nobody here. She's gone. And so what I'm wondering is, has Wanda already, did she wake up and she knows that they're coming and she already began this process of sort of unleashing this spell? In reality, has already started to change.
One to change.
Right.
Because everyone suddenly stops talking to him.
Yeah. And I definitely get the sense that it's his spider sense probably has something to do with that. Like if this was in film, if Zack Snyder filmed it, we would see about 30 seconds of slow motion here, where Spider-Man is suddenly aware of like something's happening and I'm not sure what, and everybody's stopped and kind of fading out into shadows. Right, the artwork all kind of changes. And you get these strange panels. And I constantly come back to this page. And for those maybe reading this in the digital version, that's how I'm reading this anyway, via Comixology. It's the digital sort of collected version of this. Is on page 26. It's this whole scene we're talking about. And there's a door opening. And you see empty hallways and kind of empty space. And the shadows seem to be closing in around Peter. And his face, he's like peeking out from the edge of the frame. And you get kind of the edge of his head, almost the sense of like he senses that something is coming and something's happening. And then what is possibly one of the more vivid images in this entire book, right? Which it's, I'm just going to have to go ahead and say it. Pardon me if anyone's sensitive to the language here. What appears to be a vaginal birth. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. You get this light at the end of a tunnel. And then Peter wakes up to the sound of a screaming baby.
And he's
it's a very cinematic,
some blonde lady.
It's a very cinematic transition that if someone made a movie out of this is a perfect transition where you get this tunnel with a light at the end of it. And Peter senses that he's moving into this other reality, sort of being birthed into this new reality, wakes up to the sound of a screaming baby, and somewhere off screen, a woman, presumably a wife, is saying, "Peter, it's your turn, right? Go
She's
see
right
this
there.
screaming baby." And apparently this is not Mary Jane.
No, that's not Mary. Mary Jane's a famous movie star, apparently.
That's right. And so Peter married Gwen Stacy. There's a picture of them there on the bedside, right? Married, and Peter's waking up to go see about a baby, and that's the end. Right, at that first arc, that first act.
Yeah. And then was when WandaVision begins.
Right, in a manner of speaking. So we wake up in Act 2, and it's a completely different, it's still Earth. Everything still seems to be, it's New York City. Everything's still there, right? But
like everyone's a mutant.
The world is filled with mutants.
And Steve Rogers is old.
Steve Rogers is old. He never went in the ice.
He never got frozen in ice.
That's right. So we have a lot of characters here. And so the reasons for these things, and I don't want to spoil it necessarily. If anybody's reading along with us in this, right, you're going to take your time. Maybe you want to read ahead. But there's a very important reason for these things that you're not aware of at this point in the story. Like, why is most of the population a mutant? Why is Steve old? Right? Why are all these things? And we get some scenes in the next several pages. What we see is that Scott Summers is married to Emma Frost, and he appears to be, having his breakfast, and he's getting a suit tie on. He's about to go to work. Right? And you get some daytime TV shows. You get some of these people who we're used to seeing as kind of, famous heroes, members of the X-Men, past and one-time members of the X-Men and the Avengers, who are just apparently having these kind of normal lives. And they're daytime talk show hosts.
Richards is dead.
Right? They're TV actors. Some of these people are still superheroes. Right, get this scene of Captain Marvel, who used to be called Miss Marvel.
Is she Captain again here? Because I thought
I think she's Miss Marvel. She's in the old school Miss Marvel, the stripper outfit, which is, you get Remy, aka Gambit, right, who's just a thief, right? He's kind of running from the law there. She arrests him.
Kicks his ass.
Kitty Pryde, right, is a school. She's a school teacher. You get all of these.
That she throws Gambit against there.
Mm-hmm.
It's apparently
a statue of a sentinel. So anyway,
Yeah, and that looks like Silver Surfer's kid in the classroom.
Luke Cage is apparently some sort of underground boss somehow. Apparently,
Because he's not a mutant, so they consider
Correct.
him a what do they call him? Sapiens.
That's a Homo sapien. That's right.
And then there's Sam Wilson, so they have this big
Yeah. And
conversation.
what's
with
interesting, you've got most of the Hell's Kitchen crew, the so-called the Defenders. This crew that includes Luke Cage, Matt Murdock, Danny Rand, Jessica Jones, Shang-Chi present in here. No, I don't think you see Elektra at some point, but you basically have this crew. What's her name? Misty Knights. A lot of these characters that are this kind of Harlem Underground present. Is it Sam who's a cop?
Yeah, Sam's a
basically
cop.
He's a police detective.
And
Stephen Strange.
Wilson Fisk into a coma.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if you've read past this issue, you realize Luke Cage is apparently an important part of this story in that crew.
Oh, sure. Well,
I love
Stephen
that they make
is
Stephen Strange a psychologist.
Psychiatrist, right? Or he's a psychologist, isn't he? Not a psychiatrist. And so
who's this fella? I'm sorry. I'm jumping up. Because the Luke Cage thing, it's really hard to talk about that without talking about the future issues.
Sure. All right.
Who's the fella that Stephen Strange is helping out here? Oh, good. That is in this issue because I wanted to point this out when you mentioned it earlier. This guy that's talking to Robert is talking to Stephen Strange and describes this black wall.
Yep.
And that very reminiscent of what Spider-Man saw before it went into the world.
Yep. And I'm not sure we know who this is.
Oh, okay. So this isn't someone, but this is someone that's just maybe they're seeing through it on their own.
It's possible that they're having a memory, and that it's possible that Wanda's transformation of the world has left thousands, if not millions, of people with some kind of PTSD.
They're really kind of telling you once you read that part that we know about, which we'll be talking about next week because I think it's in episode 3 or 4. Yeah, you really get to see that all of these scenes kind of explain are setting that up, like everything we see.
Yep, and we get a scene of it, and so again, I don't want to spoil too much here, but essentially what you're seeing is a lot of these mainstay characters in the Marvel universe are apparently happy.
Yeah.
And they have sort of normal lives, just kind of going about their day.
Wolverine, absolutely. He's like, wait a minute. No, this isn't right.
You see Peter here, Colossus he's a farmer. Right? Which he and his sister, that's always been their background. They grew up on a farm in Russia. And I love the fact that he's, the mutants, obviously, they're all still mutants. They have their powers and abilities, and Peter's like just pulling this giant combine. With his hand.
Dr. Strange never had his accident, so he never became a sorcerer.
Correct. Seems apparent. Now, this next bit is very interesting because this is when we get to see one of the darker sides of this story, which is the fact that this relationship of prejudice and, frankly, racism and this element that has always been a really core tenet of the X-Men, right? It's always been a story about intolerance versus tolerance, about, violence versus diplomacy, about acceptance, and about trying to, get along with people who genetically, culturally, right, socially, people who aren't just like us, right, and trying to find some common ground there. That's Professor X's kind of dream. Is a world where humans and mutants alike can share and just one brotherhood there. But now you get this scene where things have been flipped upside down. And you see this very unfortunate scene where Hank McCoy, the Beast, who never did the experiment to try to get rid of his powers and thus turned blue, he's still pink-skinned or Caucasian, right? Because he never had the reason or the impetus to try to fix his mutation, which is what turned him blue.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
And he's talking to Hank Pym in a very derogatory and condescending way, because apparently in Dr. McCoy, in Hank McCoy's mind, the mutant genome and the mutant mind is superior, right? And don't feel too bad, Hank, because it's not your fault. You're not a mutant, right? It's not your fault that you're just a Homo sapien. This is essentially the crux, I think, of this conversation. And it's very derogatory, very demeaning. And you get a very demoralized Hank Pym just sort of feeling like, you know, probably somewhere in the back of his mind, he's remembering a moment in the past before this, you know, huge change to the world where I was one of the smartest people on the planet. How can you talk to me that way?
So he's judging by the he's dead, right? Because he's Ant-Man.
It was actually the Scott Lang Ant-Man.
Oh, it was Scott Lang. So Hank. Okay.
Yeah. And if you go back to one of the first pages, the conversation where they bring all the Avengers together, this was a period of time where Hank Pym was the Yellow Jacket.
Oh.
Which again is one of those kind of plot points that diverges a bit from the comics universe, because there was a long stretch there where Hank Pym was the hero known as Yellow Jacket. And in the Ant-Man film, you get the, Corey, what's his name? The actor that played the Yellow Jacket character. Can't remember his name, but he's a villain, right? Obviously, in the Ant-Man film.
Oh, in the first one. Yeah, that was Yellow. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Anywho, and you get a similar kind of scene with Storm and Janet Pym, right? The Wasp, who has always been a fashion designer. And Storm appears to kind of throw this tantrum where she just she flares up a whirlwind there inside her, you know, design studio and just trashes the place. And Janet is just humiliated, right? And then finally, we get this scene where Logan. I love this element of this story because it's a little bit like what I was saying earlier. I feel like there was something about the change before the world changed where Peter, more than anyone, could sort of see it coming because of his spider sense, right? In this very poignant scene. And now you flip that coin over, right? We're looking at it in the opposite direction. Logan is one of the only people that remembers because of his healing power, presumably. And this is very similar to the element in Days of Future Past that allows Logan to go back in time, to get projected back in time, to be able to withstand that because his physiology is so freaking resilient. His mind, his nervous system can heal almost as fast as it takes the damage. I think
it's also, if you remember from one of the future episodes, it's also he remembers based on one of the reasons everyone's so happy. It's the thing
that too. But what wakes him up, he's having a nightmare and he remembers being in the Mutant X program.
Yep.
He has the memory of being in that tank and waking up strapped to all that gear and all the tubes and everything hanging out. That was the little injectors putting the adamantium in his skeleton. He wakes up out of the water screaming. And he wakes up in bed and, oh my God, Jean Grey, or someone that looks like Jean Grey, is climbing into bed with me, which immediately, right, his subconscious is still kind of keyed up from this nightmare, and he smells her and realizes that it's not Jean. He's like, what the hell's going on here? And it turns out it's Mystique.
Yep.
And he has no idea what's happening. And everyone else in the reality is like, what the hell's wrong with Logan, right? Because no one else remembers.
Right.
And he's like, oh God, he starts running out and he's got to get some fresh air, and he runs out onto the deck of a helicarrier.
Yes. In this crazy futuristic world where I guess those are some sort of weird sentinels flying around.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
And there's this symbol, and so there's a lot to dig in the next couple episodes that we're going to do next week. Yeah, this is great. Thoroughly enjoying this one. So we can talk about episode. I'm calling them episodes because the Green Lantern comics refer to them as seasons and episodes. So it's, but the next 2 issues of this, this next week. But Wolverine. It's like I said, we can't really say much until once we get the next 2 issues, then we'll probably be able to go back and talk about a lot of what happened in these first 2.
Yep. Yeah, the reason for all of these things becomes apparent as Logan begins to put some pieces together. He starts to connect some dots. He kind of has a kind of detective kind of story arc here, where he has to put a lot of pieces together.
It's a very good, like the next couple issues are a very good Wolverine story.
Yeah.
It's very, very good.
Well, what's very interesting, I know I'm peeking ahead here a little bit into issue 3, but you get like 30 or 40 years worth of Wolverine comics compressed into about 2.5 pages.
Yes, I was looking at that.
You get his life story and flashbacks, which is great.
Yeah, I'm loving the art in this too. It's really good. But so that was it for this episode, and everyone bonus, you all get 2 episodes this week once I splice them all together and upload them. So I would say we'll probably do this next week and be back on our regular mix of DC, and actually there may be even other things to talk about. We got a lot of upcoming things. So we'll get into
like, subscribe, leave comments. If you've got suggestions for more book club in the future after we finish House of M, please do that. Don't drink any super soldier serum because it could turn you into a maniacal freedom fighter.
Yes, we don't want any maniacal freedom fighters.
All right.
All right.